Hello everyone, I am Dr. Barbara O'Neill. Today, I want to share crucial insights into how our diet impacts our long-term health. We often overlook the profound effects that certain harmful foods have on our well-being, contributing to serious conditions like cancer, obesity, and other diseases. These foods, rich in toxins and detrimental compounds, can damage our DNA and promote disease. So what foods are high in phosphorus, sulfur and chlorine? Meat. This explains why Dr. Colin Campbell found he could turn cancer cells on and off like a switch by the amount of meat and dairy products he was giving the rats. Refined sugar, it's very acid forming. The hybridized wheat, the hybridization of the wheat created a lot more of the acid-forming minerals. Aged cheese, what's the blue in the blue vein cheese? The blue in the blue vein cheese is mold. So the only cheeses that don't sit under that category, the cheeses that have probably a pH of 7 would be your fresh. So that's your cottage, your ricotta. I'm not saying that they are okay, because usually they come from cows who have not been fed right or have chemicals in them. But on the pH scale, they're not as acid. Caffeine, all your caffeine foods and drinks have an acid effect. And of course, caffeine usually comes hand in hand with the sugar, which certainly ups it. And remember our 2.6 Coca-Cola, that's a combination of the caffeine and the sugar. Did you know that Coca-Cola is called Coca-Cola? Because I think it was in the early part of the 20th century, they put cocaine in it. And then they went over to caffeine, which is just as dangerous. Alcohol is not a food, but it creates an acid environment in the body. Tobacco is not a food, but it also creates an acid environment in the body. All your other grains, other than the grains that sit on the alkaline side, all your other legumes, other than the lima, lentil and soy, and all your other nuts, other than the almond and Brazil, have an acid effect. To maintain the 6.5 environment, we need to be consuming 20% acid-forming foods and 80%, 70 to 80% alkaline-forming foods. And I'm sure you're not surprised to hear me say that the 20% should come from this section here. Yes, oatmeal is here. Yes, rice is here. They're not bad grains. We need a little acid. Yes, your chickpeas are here, and your garbanzos, your chickpeas, your black-eyed beans, your kidney beans. They're not bad. Of course they're not bad. We need a little acid. It's when the whole meal is acid that tips the scales. How many Americans would be eating 90% acid, 10% alkaline? Is that true? No wonder cancer and heart disease are neck to neck for the #1 killers in the world today. Far more people die from alcohol-related diseases. Far more people die from tobacco-related diseases. And yet they're not banning tobacco or alcohol, are they? That's why the deaths to COVID fade into insignificance against all of these. It's a critical issue that most of us overlook in our daily lives. We tend to consume foods that increase the acidity in our body without realizing the detrimental impact this has on our overall health. As I mentioned earlier, it's vital to maintain a balance where 70 to 80% of our diet should consist of alkaline-forming foods. This balance helps in stabilizing the body's pH level, which is essential for optimal health. In the modern diet, what we often see is an overconsumption of processed foods and sugars, which are not only acid-forming, but also contribute to various health issues such as obesity, diabetes, and heart diseases. It's imperative to understand that the type of food you choose affects not just your pH balance, but your overall health. Take, for example, the grains and legumes that are considered healthy. Yes, they are indeed healthy, but only when consumed in moderation. When your diet is heavily laden with these, alongside other acid-forming foods like meat and dairy products, it tips the balance towards acidity, which can lead to inflammation and various chronic diseases. Caffeine does a couple of things. Caffeine disrupts the neurotransmitters in the brain, and we'll look at that a little bit more, I think, on the Wednesday lecture. And that's why people feel good when they have a cup of coffee, because it causes a crisis response. It disrupts the neurotransmitters. But what I specifically wanted to look at regarding minerals is it takes the minerals out, especially calcium and magnesium. And bones and teeth are deteriorating far too young today. Mineral deficiency is the caffeine's taking those minerals out. You see, it's a toxin to the body, and so the body gives it minerals to calm it down. But because it disrupts the neurotransmitters in the brain, it causes some damage in the DNA. So you can have a couple, both having a couple of cups of coffee a day, maybe a Coke. What do you have here? Dr. Pepper, maybe chocolate. If this is happening day after day after day, then that couple will conceive and have a child, and that child can have a tendency to autism, attention deficit syndrome, because they've been born with a gene that has disrupted the neurotransmitters in the brain. And it's a serious concern that we cannot ignore. What many don't realise is that our dietary choices, particularly our consumption of caffeine, play a significant role in this decline. Caffeine, while providing a temporary boost, actually leaches essential minerals from our body, notably calcium and magnesium, which are crucial for the health of our bones and teeth. This demineralization process contributes to a range of health issues, including osteoporosis at increasingly younger ages. But when someone's on a high carbohydrate diet, let's have a look at some of these. A lot of breads are sweetened with high fructose corn syrup. Many in the cake section are sweetened with high fructose corn syrup. And high fructose corn syrup is probably the cheapest form of sweetening. So it's put in a lot of the carbohydrate foods. So let's say someone's having for breakfast a orange juice. It's usually sweetened with sugar. Even if it says no added sugar, they are allowed to put sugar in it. What do I mean by that? On a good year, when the rains come at the right time and the oranges are sweet, they don't have to put any sugar in it. But on a bad year, when they don't get the rains at the right time, the oranges aren't as sweet. By law, they can add sugar to bring it up to the sweetness of the good year and say no added sugar. It's sort of just a trick in wording. They'll say, well, there's no added sugar after we got it to the sweetening of the good year. So even when it says no added sugar, it's like they do this trick in their wording. It's like margarine. It says polyunsaturated fat. It's actually a saturated fat. Otherwise, when you open the jar of margarine, it'd be liquid. And if you say, well, but it's saturated, and they say, well, it was polyunsaturated before we saturated it. Can you see it's this, again, trick in wording? Remember last night we looked at the lies and the deception that can come through, and they'll say, well, it's not really a lie. Well, it's either black or it's white. And so let's say that someone's having the orange juice. Sugar breaks down to fructose and glucose. This is refined sugar. And of course there's quite a bit of fructose in the orange juice. So we're already getting a little bit of an overload of fructose there. Whereas if the person ate the orange, the fructose and the glucose are in quite a balanced amount, and the liver can quickly convert that little bit of fructose to glucose. But let's go back. They're having a glass of orange juice, then they have a croissant, and the croissant's been sweetened with high fructose corn syrup. And they have a cup of coffee, and they put sugar in that, more fructose and glucose, and they might have a slice of bread, and the bread's been sweetened with high fructose corn syrup, and they have a sweet jam, and the jam's got the fructose being the fruit and the sugar in it, which is more fruit. Can you see what's going on here? We're getting an overload of fructose. So instead of a little bit of fructose coming to the liver, a huge amount of fructose is coming to the liver, and the liver cannot convert it all to glucose. So then it just stores it on the liver as fat. There's your fatty liver. We're getting an overload of fructose, which is a major concern in our modern diet. When fructose is consumed in excessive amounts, especially from processed sources like high fructose corn syrup found in many baked goods and sweetened beverages, it becomes a significant health hazard. This overload can lead to liver stress and eventually conditions like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, not to mention its role in exacerbating obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. Now consider how even seemingly healthy choices like orange juice can contribute to this problem when they're processed and sweetened. Even when labels claim no added sugar, it doesn't necessarily mean the product is free from sugar. It's a misleading aspect of food labeling that can deceive consumers into thinking they're making healthier choices. The problem extends beyond just fructose. The overall high sugar content, which includes both glucose and fructose, disrupts our body's natural ability to regulate blood sugar levels. This disruption can lead to insulin resistance, a precursor to type 2 diabetes. Therefore, it's crucial to understand the real contents of our food. Opting for whole fruits instead of processed juices and reducing our intake of processed carbohydrates can significantly mitigate these risks. By making informed choices and understanding the implications of food labeling, we can take proactive steps towards maintaining our health and preventing chronic diseases. And when you consider that cancer cells consume 15 times the glucose, we aim for a diet that is very low glucose. So what would that diet be? It would be high vegetable. Vegetables are high in fibre. They're high in minerals and low in sugars. So what we suggest is no fruit for 6 weeks. You see, fruit is high in fibre, high in sugars, low in minerals. And a lady said to me, "But Barbara, God made fruit good." I said, "That's right. He made fruit very good. And fruit is delicious. But if someone has a certain condition in their body, they need to do some adjustments until they conquer that condition, and then they can ease back on the fruit." What one writer, he explained it like this: having no fruit for 6 weeks, it's like having a sledgehammer effect on cancer. Because it consumes glucose so fast, when you eat a food program that's very low in glucose, Dr. Holland in the book, The Germ That Causes Cancer, he said when you deprive cancer cells of glucose, they self-destruct. See, we live in a body that can heal itself. We just need to give it the right conditions. So it's important to understand why we keep the fruit away for 6 weeks. So high vegetable, generous proteins. So what are the generous proteins? Legumes, nuts and seeds. They're the cleanest burning fuels. In the book The China Study by Dr. Colin Campbell. Interesting book. This guy was trained in medicine, he became a vet, and he was taught that if you want protein, it must be meat, and if you want calcium, it must be milk. And he went to the Philippines because children were dying of liver cancer between the age of 8 and 10 years of age. And he presumed that the poorer children would be dying and the wealthy children not dying as much, because the poorer children are eating a very simple basic diet, but the wealthy children are having what Time magazine called the meat sweet diet. High meat, high dairy, high refined. But when he went to the Philippines, he found that the village children weren't dying as much as the city children. And the only difference was the diet. And what he found was that every single jar of peanut butter he tested had aflatoxin. Now, aflatoxin is a mold. So it's a mold waste. Aflatoxin. And aflatoxin is a mold waste that directly affects the liver. And that mold waste comes from the mold Aspergillus. So Aspergillus is the mold, and the mold waste from Aspergillus is aflatoxin. You see, peanuts are not a nut, they're a legume. They grow in the ground and they mould very easy. See, I know in Australia 75% of people live in the city, so the food's all grown in the country. So they grows in huge amounts, it's all stored in silos. You get a cold frosty morning, you get a hot sunny day. What's building up in the silo is the moisture, which is where mould of course, thrives. So every jar of peanut butter had aflatoxin. This is a profound realization that the organism's environment, our body's internal landscape, dictates our health. The studies by Dr. Colin Campbell in the China study illuminate the powerful influence of diet on our health, especially regarding cancer. When we understand that cancer cells thrive on glucose, it becomes clear that a low glucose diet, rich in vegetables and low in sugars, is not just a preventative measure, but a potential therapeutic approach. In my approach, we focus on creating an environment where cancer cannot thrive. This involves a diet high in fibrous vegetables and generous in proteins from legumes, nuts, and seeds. These sources of protein are not only clean burning, but also do not promote cancer growth like animal proteins do. Some of them eat meat, and if they do, it's only a very small part of the diet. And the third one was they're very social. We're social people, and it's an important part of us. So what's another one that leaches minerals out of the body is alcohol. Alcohol's a toxic poison. It was 15 years ago, the Australian Health Department put out a statement. I haven't seen the statement since. It says there is no safe dose of alcohol. It's toxic poison. Children are being born today with fetal alcohol syndrome from parents that have even a couple of drinks a week. You see, alcohol directly affects the liver and also the brain. And leaching minerals. The other is tobacco. Children are being born today with less alveoli in their lungs. They can even develop emphysema without ever having smoked. These are poisons that are leaching minerals out of the body. So can you see what's happening today? Another reason why the DNA is breaking down, or there is damage in the DNA, is big one is lack of minerals, and also the damage that these toxins cause. Another reason why damage is happening is genetically modified foods. Genetically modified foods is the result of the DNA of two different species being spliced together in the hope that they create a tomato that grows in the snow, but it actually doesn't. In fact, this tomato that's been genetically modified has many centres. It does not have the same molecular structure as a tomato that hasn't been genetically modified, and so this has the ability to damage our DNA. And he's even giving away land to Russians who will grow organic, non-GMO food. Now that's something that hasn't hit the newspaper, isn't it? There are many things about Russia that do hit the newspaper. I don't know, but I can't believe anything that I read in that newspaper. It's a bit difficult today. But genetically modified foods have the ability to damage the DNA. Genetically modified foods have the potential to profoundly impact our health, particularly our DNA integrity. The modifications made to the genetic makeup of these foods do not just affect their ability to grow under abnormal conditions, but can also alter their nutritional content and safety. The concern is that these changes could affect human health in ways we are only beginning to understand. For instance, the splicing of DNA from different species to produce a crop that can withstand cold climates may sound innovative, but it introduces foreign genetic material into our diet, posing risks to our own genetic stability. This manipulation of the genetic code of plants is concerning because it is not a natural process and can lead to unintended consequences. These consequences might include the introduction of new allergens or toxins and changes in the nutrient profile of these foods. It is wise to favor organic and non-GMO foods as they are grown without these risky genetic alterations and are more likely to be produced in a manner that supports health and the environment. By choosing these foods, we protect our body's own genetic makeup and promote a healthier ecosystem. Therefore, when it comes to our diet and the choices we make, it is crucial to consider not only the immediate health benefits, but also the long-term genetic and environmental impact.